The Nevada desert at night. Stars stretch across an endless sky, unpolluted by city lights, stretching over a landscape so barren it feels almost lunar. The temperature has dropped to near freezing, and the only sound is the wind sweeping across the scrubland, carrying with it the scent of creosote and dust. No traffic, no aircraft, nothing but the desert and the stars.
Picture this. You're standing in the middle of nowhere, 80 miles from the nearest city. No towns, no lights for miles in any direction. Just desert stretching to the horizon, broken only by the occasional Joshua tree. And out there, in the darkness, behind fences and armed guards, is a place your government refuses to acknowledge exists.
In the remote valleys of southern Nevada, where the sun bleeds the earth dry during the day and the cold descends like a blanket at night, lies a dry lake bed that has witnessed the birth of aircraft that changed the world. It's called Groom Lake, about 3 miles long, flat as glass, perfectly smooth. It's also known as Homey Airport, if you can believe that. And it's called Area 51.
So why does that name, Area 51, make millions of people around the world lean forward? What exactly is the US government hiding in that remote Nevada valley? Is it alien spacecraft, recovered technology, something else entirely? And why has this place become the center of one of the most enduring mysteries of the modern age?
For most of its existence, the US government refused to acknowledge that Area 51 existed at all. Number official maps showed it. No press releases mentioned it. If you asked the Pentagon about it, you'd receive a polite no comment that revealed nothing. And that silence, that calculated, deliberate silence, created a vacuum that was filled with some of the most enduring, most bizarre conspiracy theories of the modern age.
Here's what's fascinating, though. The truth about Area 51 is already extraordinary. The real history is the stuff of thriller novels, spy planes that flew higher than any commercial jet, aircraft that could outrun missiles, technologies decades ahead of their time. And here's the question. Why do we need aliens to explain a place that's already almost incomprehensibly strange? I'm Tom Mackenzie, and you are listening to Unexplained History. Today, we're going to find out what's real and what's legend. We're going to explore the actual history of Area 51, from its secret beginnings to its modern-day status as a cultural phenomenon. We'll look at the aircraft that were tested there, the U-2, the SR-71, the F-117. We'll examine the conspiracy theories that grew up around it. And we'll ask the question that has obsessed millions. What is the US government really hiding at Area 51?
Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the geography. To understand Area 51, you have to understand where it sits. Geographically, it occupies a harsh, beautiful, unforgiving corner of Nevada that has been shaped by millions of years of geological forces. We're talking about ancient lake beds, volcanic tuff, and mountains that rise suddenly from the desert floor like islands in a sea of sand.
So why Groom Lake? Why this particular patch of desert? The answer is brutally simple. Because it's one of the most isolated places in America. We're talking about the Nevada Test and Training Range, over 4,600 square miles of restricted airspace where the military can do whatever they want without explaining anything to anyone.
The lake bed itself is about 3 miles long and varies from 1 to 2 miles in width. It's a flat expanse of hard-packed earth, perfectly smooth, created over millennia as water evaporated from this ancient lake. It's ideal for landing aircraft, smoother than any runway humans could build, and much longer than anything constructed by hand.
Surrounding it are the Gyre and Quagant ranges, with Frenchman Mountain to the southwest. The whole area is part of the Great Basin, a vast expanse of desert and mountains that covers most of Nevada and extends into Utah and Oregon. It's one of the most sparsely populated regions in the United States. In fact, the entire region has a population density of less than 2 people per square mile.
In 1955, that remoteness was exactly what the CIA was looking for. The Cold War was heating up, and America needed to know what the Soviets were building. But spy planes of the era were vulnerable. Too slow, too low, too easy to shoot down. Something radical was needed. And that radical idea would come from a legendary engineer named Kelly Johnson.
But before we get to that, let's talk about what made this place so perfect for secret aircraft development. It's not just the isolation, it's the combination of factors. Clear weather year-round, with perhaps 250 flyable days annually. A hard surface for takeoffs and landings that nature had provided for free. And most importantly, absolute isolation from prying eyes.
The CIA approached the Atomic Energy Commission and asked to use a portion of the Nevada test site. The AEC had numbered the areas on their maps. Area 51 was one of them. That designation stuck, even though it was never meant to be public, and suddenly, the most secret airport in American history had a name.
What they built there would change the course of the Cold War and create the perfect breeding ground for one of the most enduring conspiracy theories in history. But it all started with one man's vision.
The desert environment presented unique challenges for the aircraft tested at Groom Lake. The dry lake bed provided a naturally smooth runway, but it also created issues with dust ingestion into engines and poor visibility during takeoffs and landings. The extreme temperature variations, from freezing nights to scorching days, placed enormous stress on aircraft materials and systems.
Despite these challenges, the desert proved ideal for secret testing. The isolation meant that crashes, sadly common during the development of experimental aircraft, could be contained without public knowledge. The vast emptiness of the Nevada desert became America's greatest asset in keeping its most sensitive programs hidden from view.
His name was Clarence Kelly Johnson, but everyone called him Kelly. He was a legendary aerospace engineer who had already designed some of America's most important aircraft, including the P-38 Lightning of World War II fame. In 1955, he worked at Lockheed's famous Skunk Works, a classified division known for developing cutting-edge technology at impossible speeds.
The Skunk Works was unlike anything else in American industry. It was a secretive team of engineers and designers who worked in a converted parking garage in Burbank, California. Their culture was obsessive, their methods unorthodox, and their results were simply unlike anything else being built in the world. They were the best of the best, hand-picked by Johnson himself.
Johnson approached the CIA with a radical idea: build a spy plane that could fly higher than any missile could reach, over 70,000 feet. At that altitude, the sky turns deep indigo, the curve of the Earth becomes visible, and no Soviet weapon could touch it. It would fly above the atmosphere, beyond the reach of any fighter or missile the Soviets possessed.
Think about that for a second. 70,000 feet. Kelly Johnson wanted to fly above the reach of any Soviet fighter, any missile, any defense system. It was audacious, it was insane, and it just might work. The concept was deceptively simple. If you fly high enough, nothing can shoot you down.
The CIA agreed. They called the project Aquatone, and they needed a place to build and test this impossible aircraft. They approached the Atomic Energy Commission and asked to use a portion of the Nevada test site, a place that would soon be known as Area 51.
The CIA requested the facility be added to the Nevada test site specifically for this project. They needed absolute secrecy, somewhere the aircraft could be assembled, test-flown, and hidden from prying eyes. Groom Lake was perfect, remote, isolated, perfect for keeping the world's most advanced aircraft away from prying eyes.
What Johnson and his team at Skunk Works created was unlike anything that had ever flown before. The aircraft was impossibly thin, 80-foot wingspan, but weighing barely more than a small car. It was built with exotic materials that had to be specially sourced, including stainless steel arranged in a unique configuration.
They even bought the titanium from the Soviet Union, the very country the U-2 was designed to spy on. That's one of the great ironies of the Cold War. The US was buying metal from the enemy to build a plane that would spy on that same enemy. It was absurd, it was brilliant, and it was about to change everything.
That designation, Area 51, stuck even though it was never meant to be public. And suddenly, the most secret airport in American history had a name that would become famous worldwide.
What they built there would change the course of the Cold War and create the perfect breeding ground for one of the most enduring conspiracy theories in history.
The Skunk Works operated under a simple philosophy: speed through bureaucracy and efficiency. Johnson believed in minimal paperwork, quick decision-making, and get-in results. He famously said that if you have a good idea but have to write a report to get approval, the enemy will have already developed the same technology. The Skunk Works cut through the red tape that paralyzed other military projects.
This approach was revolutionary. Other defense contractors took years to develop new aircraft. The Skunk Works did it in months. They built the first operational stealth fighter in record time, using techniques that would become standard in aerospace development. It was a different way of doing business, and it worked.
August 4th, 1955. Dawn breaks over Groom Lake, and a group of engineers gathers beside the dry lake bed. They're about to attempt something that's never been done before. The aircraft before them is impossibly thin, 80-foot wingspan, but weighing barely more than a small car, built with exotic materials.
No one knew if it would stay in the air. The U-2 was essentially a glider with a jet engine strapped to it. It had no radar, no modern navigation systems in the way we think of them today. It was manually controlled by a single pilot who sat in a cockpit that was little more than a seat with a window. To fly at 70,000 feet meant sitting in a pressurized suit, breathing pure oxygen, and hoping nothing went wrong. No one knew if the aircraft would hold together at those altitudes, if it would stall, spin, or simply break apart in the thin air. This was uncharted territory. Every flight was essentially a scientific experiment with a human test subject.
Pilot Tony Blavin taxied the aircraft down the lake bed. Not a full flight, not yet. Just the first time the aircraft had moved under its own power. The first time those impossible wings had borne weight. The first time the world had glimpsed what was to come. And then, a few weeks later, came the first actual flight.
And here's where things start to get strange. Because over the next few years, pilots and civilians began seeing objects in the sky near Groom Lake that looked nothing like airplanes. The U-2 flew at altitudes no commercial pilot had ever encountered. At 70,000 feet, the sky turns a deep, dark purple, unlike anything seen at lower altitudes. The curve of the Earth becomes visible, with the horizon curving away into the distance.
And from the ground, these planes left contrails that looked strange, different from anything that had come before. The U-2's contrails were unusually persistent, sometimes lasting for hours, and because they flew so high, they were visible from a vast distance, sometimes appearing as bright streaks in the sky that seemed to defy explanation.
And when civilians saw these objects, they didn't know what to make of them, because the government sure wasn't telling them. All they got was silence. And silence, it turns out, is the perfect breeding ground for speculation. When you see something you can't explain, and the only authority that should know refuses to help, your imagination fills in the blanks.
In 1956, the U-2 began operational missions over the Soviet Union. For the first time, American spy planes could photograph Soviet military installations, nuclear facilities, and cities from above without fear of being shot down. The intelligence they gathered was invaluable, and it helped prevent what many feared would be an inevitable nuclear war.
The U-2 program was one of the most successful intelligence operations in history. It provided the U.S. with thousands of photographs of Soviet military installations, helping policymakers understand Soviet capabilities and avoid miscalculations that could have led to nuclear war. But it also created a massive problem. What happens when one of these planes gets shot down?
That question would be answered on a May morning in 1960, in a way that would change everything and give the UFO conspiracy theory its most powerful fuel yet.
Because when the world found out the US was flying secret aircraft over Soviet territory, everything changed.
The U-2 wasn't just an aircraft. It was a symbol of American ingenuity and determination. At a time when the Soviet Union seemed to be pulling ahead in the space race, the U-2 proved that American technology could achieve the impossible. It flew higher than any aircraft before it, and its success paved the way for generations of high-altitude reconnaissance.
But for all its achievements, the U-2 also represented the growing tension between secrecy and democracy. How could citizens trust their government when that government was actively lying to them about what was happening in their own skies? This question would become central to the Area 51 debate.
May 1st, 1960. A U-2 spy plane is flying over Soviet territory at 70,000 feet, well above any known altitude for aircraft. The pilot, Francis Gary Powers, is conducting a secret reconnaissance mission for the CIA, photographing Soviet military installations from above the reach of their defenses. The mission is routine, or so it seems.
What happened next became one of the most dramatic moments of the Cold War. The Soviets didn't shoot the plane down with a conventional fighter, not because they couldn't, but because they wanted to prove they could. They launched an SA-2 guideline missile, a surface-to-air missile that had never been used against an aircraft before, and it found its target.
The missile exploded near the U-2, damaging it critically. Powers attempted to stabilize the damaged aircraft, but it was hopeless. He ejected and parachuted to the ground, landing in Soviet territory where he was immediately captured by Soviet forces. The incident sparked an international crisis that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war.
Think about what this did to the UFO story. Here was concrete proof that the US was flying secret aircraft over Soviet territory. But the public didn't know about the U-2 program. All they knew was that a spy plane had been shot down, and the US government was lying about what it was.
Initially, the US government denied the plane was a spy aircraft. They claimed it was a weather research plane that had strayed off course. But the Soviets had powers. They had the wreckage. And they had the evidence. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev revealed the pilot and the plane, embarrassing the United States on the world stage.
This was a disaster for US intelligence, but more importantly, it confirmed what people had suspected. The government was flying secret aircraft and lying about it. If they were hiding the U-2, what else were they hiding? That question would haunt Area 51 for decades to come.
Powers was eventually returned to the US in a prisoner swap in 1962. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross upon his return, though some questioned his conduct during captivity. But the damage was done. The incident confirmed every suspicion people had about secret government programs.
And it gave UFO enthusiasts the perfect evidence. The government was hiding aircraft, maybe more than just spy planes. If they'd hidden the U-2 for years, what else were they hiding at that secret base in Nevada?
But even as the U-2 program continued, and even after that embarrassing incident, the CIA was already working on its successor, an aircraft even more advanced, an aircraft that would push the boundaries of speed and altitude further than anyone thought possible.
And that aircraft would become a legend in its own right.
The Powers incident had far-reaching consequences beyond the immediate embarrassment. It led to the cancellation of the U-2 overflights and forced the US to develop more sophisticated reconnaissance methods, including satellites. But it also created a template for how the government would handle secrets. Deny everything until proof becomes overwhelming.
The incident also had a profound effect on the American psyche. Here was proof that the government would lie to its own citizens, not about something trivial, but about something that could have started a nuclear war. If they'd lie about a spy plane, what else were they lying about?
By the 1960s, UFO sightings near Groom Lake had become almost routine, and the witnesses weren't crackpots or kooks. They were professional pilots, air traffic controllers, military personnel. These were people trained to identify aircraft, to track objects on radar, to understand the physics of flight, and they were baffled by what they were seeing.
That's what makes these accounts so compelling. These weren't believers. These were skeptics. Hard-nosed, practical people who'd spent their lives studying the sky. And they were seeing things they couldn't explain. Not just civilians, but people whose job it was to know what was flying in the sky.
In 1964, a commercial pilot reported seeing a strange object near Groom Lake while flying a commercial flight between cities. The object had no wings, no visible means of propulsion, and moved at incredible speed, far faster than any aircraft he had ever seen. It disappeared in a vertical climb that defied everything he knew about aviation.
Now, we know what he was probably seeing. The A-12 ox cart, the successor to the U-2, had a unique shape, like a flying wedge, almost like a boomerang. It was made of titanium, and when the sun hit it at certain angles, it looked like nothing from this world. It looked exactly like what people would imagine a spacecraft to look like.
There was also the mystery of the so-called Janet Airlines. For years, people reported seeing small civilian aircraft, particularly Boeing 737s, flying Shenmida routes in and out of Area 51. These were real aircraft, but their purpose was classified. To UFO enthusiasts, they became evidence of something more sinister.
The truth was mundane. These were government-contracted civilian aircraft transporting workers to and from the test site. But to UFO enthusiasts, every unexplained flight was proof of a cover-up. The Janet Airlines became one of the most persistent mysteries of Area 51, despite having a completely mundane explanation.
In 1976, security guard Robert O'Blaz reported seeing a craft shaped like a cigar, about 30 feet long, hovering silently in the sky. It had an insignia he couldn't identify. He watched it for 15 minutes before it took off at immense speed, disappearing in an instant. His story made waves in UFO circles.
Here's what many people don't realize. At that exact time, another revolutionary aircraft was being tested at Groom Lake. Its shape, faceted, angular, geometric, looked like nothing anyone had ever seen. And when you see something like that hovering in the dark, cigar-shaped starts to sound like a reasonable description.
But not all witnesses were mistaken. Some saw things that genuinely couldn't be explained, at least not by conventional aircraft. There were objects that moved in ways that seemed to violate the laws of physics, that accelerated faster than any known aircraft, that changed direction instantaneously. And that's where the deeper mysteries begin.
Because here's what a lot of people don't realize. There were other programs at Area 51. Programs we still don't know everything about. Programs that might have involved more than just aircraft. In the 1980s and 1990s, the base was expanded significantly. New facilities were built, new types of aircraft were tested, and new stories began to emerge.
And in 1989, someone stepped forward with a story that would change everything. A story so specific, so detailed, that it would become one of the most famous UFO claims in history.
His name was Bob Lazar, and what he claimed would take the Area 51 myth to an entirely new level.
The phenomenon of UFO sightings near military installations wasn't unique to Area 51. Similar reports came from around the world, from British pilots seeing mysterious lights near RAF bases to American servicemen reporting strange craft over nuclear facilities. But Area 51 became the focal point because of its extreme secrecy.
The concentration of classified aircraft at Area 51 made it a perfect storm for UFO reports. When you combine secret aircraft, government denials, and human curiosity, you get conspiracy theories. It's almost inevitable. The question isn't why people believe in UFOs near Area 51. It's why they wouldn't.
If the U-2 was revolutionary, what came next was impossible. In the early 1960s, a new aircraft began taking shape at Groom Lake, an aircraft that would rewrite the rules of aviation and cement Area 51's place in aerospace history. Its name was the SR-71 Blackbird, and it was faster, higher, and more advanced than anything that had ever flown before.
The Blackbird was unlike anything that had ever flown. It could reach speeds over Mach 3, more than 2,000 miles per hour. That's nearly 3 times the speed of sound. At those velocities, the airframe would heat to over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Steel would melt. Aluminum would fail. Everything physics said was impossible. Lockheed built it anyway.
The aircraft was made almost entirely of titanium, special titanium, because standard aerospace titanium wasn't strong enough. One of the great ironies of the Cold War. The US secretly purchased this titanium from the very country the Blackbird was designed to spy on.
Think about that. The logistics were mind-boggling.
The Pratt & Whitney J58 engines were works of art, capable of converting between jet and ramjet operation at supersonic speeds, each taking over a year to build.
And here's something pilots loved to tell. The Blackbird leaked fuel on the ground. Because the aircraft was designed to expand during flight, the heat from Mach 3 flight would cause the metal to expand so much that seals that leaked at rest would become perfectly tight at speed. Pilots literally had to start the engines and warm up the aircraft before they could take off. Otherwise, they'd lose all their fuel through those expanding seals.
The Blackbird could outrun any missile ever built. During its service life, it was never shot down. Not once. Soviet missiles simply couldn't reach it. It flew higher, faster, and farther than anything in the sky. And it did it all from Groom Lake.
And every time one of these aircraft took off from Groom Lake, pilots and ground crews saw something that looked like it came from another world.
The SR-71 remained in service until 1998, though its operational missions had ended years earlier. But its legacy lived on, and it paved the way for what would become perhaps the most bizarre aircraft ever built, the F-117 Nighthawk.
And that story? That one changes everything. Because the F-117 wasn't just fast, it was invisible.
Pilots described the experience as intense. Cockpit temperatures could exceed 250 degrees Fahrenheit at cruise, hot enough to fry an egg on the instrument panel. They wore special cooling suits just to survive. And when they lit the afterburners, the aircraft could accelerate from idle to Mach 3 in under 3 minutes, leaving any potential threat far behind. Flying the Blackbird was unlike any other aircraft experience. Pilots described the cockpit as like sitting in a furnace at cruise speed. With temperatures reaching 300 degrees Fahrenheit, the aircraft expanded so much during flight that it grew several inches in length. Pilots wore special cooling suits just to survive the heat.
But despite the challenges, Blackbird pilots absolutely loved flying the aircraft. They described it as the most responsive, most capable machine they'd ever flown. The aircraft could literally fly circles around any threat, outrunning missiles with ease. It was the ultimate expression of American technological supremacy.
In the 1970s, a new kind of aircraft began taking shape at Groom Lake, not just faster or higher than anything before, but fundamentally different. It was called the F-117 Nighthawk, and it would change warfare forever. It was invisible. Not hard to detect, not small on radar. Completely, absolutely invisible to radar detection.
Invisible to radar. The concept was so radical that many engineers at Lockheed thought it was impossible. But a mathematician named Dennis Overholtzer had proven it could be done using a mathematical concept called polygonal diffraction, and the result was the most unusual aircraft ever built.
The F-1117 looked like no aircraft ever before. Faceted, angular, almost geometric, with flat surfaces that seemed to catch the light in strange ways. It looked like a diamond, or perhaps a spacecraft from science fiction. When it first flew in secret at Groom Lake, even the engineers who built it weren't sure it would work.
Here's how stealth works. Briefly, radar works by bouncing radio waves off objects. The bigger the object, the stronger the return. To avoid detection, you need to bounce those waves away from the receiver to make your aircraft appear smaller than it actually is. The F-117 achieved this through its shape. Every surface was angled to deflect radar waves away from the receiver.
It was covered in special radar-absorbing materials, essentially a paint that soaked up radar waves rather than reflecting them. And critically, it only flew at night, because early stealth technology didn't work in visible light, only on radar. The first F-117s were never flown in daylight, hidden under tarps during the day, and only emerging after dark.
The first test flights were terrifying. Pilots reported that the aircraft handled strangely. It was designed to be invisible to radar, not to be particularly aerodynamic. There were crashes. Some were fatal. The program was so secret that for years, the Air Force didn't even acknowledge the aircraft existed. It was the ultimate ghost in the sky.
But in 1991, the world finally saw the F-117 in action. During the Gulf War, the Nighthawk flew deep into Iraq's most heavily defended airspace, striking targets that no other aircraft could reach. It was the first combat use of stealth technology, and it worked flawlessly. Iraq's sophisticated air defenses simply couldn't see it coming.
Every one of these aircraft, U-2, SR-71, F-117, was tested at Area 51. And everyone, when first seen by the public, was called a UFO.
But there was another story brewing, one that would take the Area 51 myth to an entirely new level. And it started with a man named Bob Lazar, who claimed to have worked on spacecraft of extraterrestrial origin at a facility called S4, just down the road from Area 51.
The story you're about to hear is either one of the most significant whistleblowing events in history or one of the most elaborate hoaxes ever perpetrated. Either way, it changed everything.
The development of stealth technology represented a fundamental shift in military strategy. For the first time, a country could strike targets deep inside enemy territory without being detected. This changed everything about how wars would be fought, and it all started at Area 51.
The success of the F-117 in the Gulf War proved that stealth worked, but it also raised new questions about what other technologies might be hiding at Area 51. If they could build an invisible fighter, what else could they build? The imagination ran wild.
December 13th, 1989. A Las Vegas television station airs an interview that will spark one of the most controversial debates in UFO history. The man on screen is unassuming. Medium build, thinning hair, glasses. He looks like someone you'd pass on the street without noticing. But what he's about to say will reshape the Area 51 narrative forever.
When the interview aired, it spread through UFO circles like wildfire. Everyone was talking about it. The claims were specific, the details were vivid, and suddenly, Area 51 wasn't just a secret base, it was the secret base. The place where the government hid alien spacecraft. It was the ultimate conspiracy theory made flesh.
His name was Bob Lazar, and before he came forward he'd been something of a local eccentric in Las Vegas. A tinkerer who had built a rocket-powered car that allegedly reached speeds of over 600 miles per hour on the desert floor. He'd worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory, though his exact role was disputed, and he had a reputation for being brilliant but unstable.
So why did people believe him? 3 reasons. First, his details were specific. He described the layout of S4, the spacecraft, the security. Second, he talked about element 115, a substance that didn't exist in 1989. And third, he spoke with the confidence of someone who had actually seen these things. It was compelling testimony.
Lazar claimed he'd worked as a physicist at a secret facility called S4, hidden inside a mountain near Area 51. Inside, he said, were 9 disc-shaped spacecraft, each about 30 feet in diameter, of extraterrestrial origin. And he'd been assigned to work on one of them. The spacecraft, he claimed, were powered by element 115.
According to Lazar, these weren't just spacecraft. They were proof that extraterrestrial life had visited Earth, and the US government had been studying them for decades. It was the ultimate conspiracy theory. Aliens had crashed. The government had recovered the technology, and now they were reverse engineering it in secret.
Lazar claimed element 115 was a super-heavy element stable enough to use as a fuel. When processed, it generated gravity waves, ripples in space-time itself. That powered the spacecraft. It was a stunning technical claim, and at the time no one could verify it. Element 115 had never been created in a laboratory. It was purely theoretical.
Here's where the investigation gets interesting, though. When journalists started digging into Lazar's background, they found problems, big ones. This is where the story starts to fall apart. Here's where the investigation gets interesting, though. When journalists started digging into Lazar's background, they found problems, big ones. This is where the story starts to fall apart.
Lazar claimed master's degrees from MIT and Caltech, but investigators found no records of his attendance at either institution, not a single transcript, not a single graduation announcement, nothing. He claimed to have worked at Los Alamos as a physicist, but Los Alamos said he was never employed there as a physicist, only possibly as a technician for a contractor.
And the US Air Force has no record of him having any clearance or access to Area 51. Not a single record. For a man who claims to have worked on the most secret project in American history, there's surprisingly little paper trail. That's unusual.
He also had a criminal record, including a conviction for running a prostitution ring in 1990, and his company was later fined for violations related to selling chemicals. None of this proves he's lying. Criminals can tell the truth, and people with checkered pasts can stumble onto extraordinary things. But it's fair to say the weight of evidence is not in his favor.
In 1993, a journalist named Philip Platt actually visited the location Lazar described as S4. He found a dry lake bed with a small building. There was no hidden entrance to a mountain. There were no alien spacecraft. The location simply didn't match Lazar's description. There were satellite photos, and they showed nothing that matched his story.
But here's the real question. In 2003, scientists did create element 115, named Moscovium after the Moscow region. It was an extraordinary moment, but it was wildly unstable, decaying in milliseconds, nothing like Lazar's stable fuel source. Scientists were quick to point out that the created atoms were too unstable to be used as anything like a power source.
So, was he lying? Or did he stumble onto something the government still doesn't want us to know? The honest answer is, we don't know. But the evidence suggests he's not who he says he is. And yet, the story persists.
Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. Bob Lazar changed the Area 51 story forever. After him, it wasn't just a secret military base. It was the secret, the place where the government supposedly hid the truth about extraterrestrial life. But here's the thing. Spy planes explain many of the sightings around Area 51. But there's another story, older, stranger, that predates the Cold War itself. A story that introduced a possibility no one had considered before. A story that began in the summer of 1947. July 1947, a rancher named Mac Brazel rides his property near Roswell, New Mexico, and finds something strange. Debris scattered across the desert. Metallic strips. Strange rubbery material. Something that looks like foil but isn't quite foil. It's clearly not from any normal aircraft. It's scattered over a large area, and it seems to have come from nowhere.
Brazel reported it to the sheriff, who reported it to the military. And on July 8, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release that would change history. Ray F. captures flying saucer. The story went global overnight. Every newspaper in the world was talking about it.
But within 24 hours, the story changed completely. The military backtracked. The debris, they said, was from a weather balloon. A simple mistake. The end of the story. Or so they thought. Because sometimes, once a story is out there, it's impossible to put it back in the box.
For decades, the official story held. The press moved on. The public forgot. And then, in 1978, everything changed. A retired United States Air Force officer named Jesse Marcel, who had been part of the team that recovered the debris in 1947, went public with a claim that would resurrect the Roswell incident from obscurity.
Marcel claimed that the weather balloon story was a cover-up. The debris, he said, was not from any weather balloon. It was from something else, something that didn't come from this world, something extraordinary. He was nearly 30 years older, but he remembered what he'd seen, and he was finally willing to talk about it.
Suddenly, the Roswell incident was back in the news. Books were written, documentaries were made, and a new question emerged. If the government was lying about Roswell, what else were they hiding? The answer, many believed, was Area 51. The connection was made. Roswell happened. The government recovered the craft. They took it to a secret location, Area 51.
This narrative was irresistible. It had everything. A mysterious crash, a government cover-up, a secret facility, and the possibility of extraterrestrial life. It was the perfect conspiracy theory. Simple enough to understand, complex enough to fuel endless speculation. And it all connected back to that place in the Nevada desert.
In 1994, after decades of denial, the government finally revealed the truth. The Roswell debris was from Project Mogul, a top-secret program using high-altitude balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. The government had lied for nearly 50 years, but the lie was to protect national security, not to hide aliens.
But by then, it didn't matter. The myth had taken root. Area 51 was cemented in the public consciousness as the place where the government hid alien technology. And in 1995, something emerged that seemed to prove it all.
The alien autopsy footage. 17 minutes of grainy black and white video showing what appeared to be pathologists dissecting an alien corpse. It was broadcast around the world. It was analyzed by experts. It was believed by millions. It was the smoking gun, or so it seemed.
Then in 2006, the truth came out. It was a hoax. The alien was made of rubber and lamb bones. The pathologists were actors. The footage was shot in a London apartment. But by then, it didn't matter. The myth had taken root. And that's the power of a good story. It doesn't need to be true to be believed.
But the story of Area 51 continues.
The Roswell incident also revealed something important about how conspiracy theories spread. Even after the government provided explanations, even after scientists showed that the debris was from a weather balloon, many people refused to accept the official story. The truth, they argued, was being hidden.
This pattern would repeat again and again. Government denials that fueled suspicion, official explanations that were rejected, and a persistent belief in hidden truths. Area 51 became the ultimate embodiment of this dynamic, a place where the truth was supposedly being hidden, no matter what evidence was presented.
Area 51 wasn't alone. It was part of a vast network of secret facilities scattered across the American West, part of what was sometimes called the Black World. This was a shadow universe of classified military and intelligence programs that existed alongside the conventional military. It was where the most advanced, most secret, and most controversial projects were conducted.
That's important context. Understanding the ecosystem of secrecy helps explain why Area 51 became such a focus of suspicion. It wasn't just one secret base, it was a whole world of secrets. A parallel universe of classified programs, black budgets, and deniable operations.
To the north lay the Nevada test site, where the US conducted over 1,000 nuclear weapons tests between 1951 and 1992. Some of those tests were atmospheric, some were underground. All of them were classified at the time, and many remain secret to this day. The radiation fallout from those tests affected thousands of people who lived downwind.
To the east was the Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, where the Army tested chemical and biological weapons. And there were others, places with names like Tonopah, Nellis, and Watertown. Each one was a node in a web of classified research. Some of it was mundane. Some of it was terrifying. All of it was secret.
The Tonopah Test Range was home to a fleet of classified aircraft, different from those tested at Groom Lake. The HAV Blue prototype, which eventually became the F-117, was tested there. Other stealth concepts, drones, and experimental aircraft all found homes in this network of secret facilities.
So we know the US was building all kinds of secret aircraft. We know they were testing surveillance technology. We know they were keeping all of it secret. Given all that, is it really so surprising that people believed they were hiding something else too? The government had proven itself capable of keeping massive secrets.
The US military has a long history of reverse engineering captured technology. After World War II, they grabbed German V-2 rockets and jet fighters. During the Cold War, they did the same with Soviet aircraft. When a MiG-15 crashed in North Korea, it was smuggled out for analysis. When a MiG-21 defected to Japan in 1966, the US got its hands on it.
So here's the question that won't go away. If they were reverse engineering Soviet aircraft, why wouldn't they do the same with something else? Something that might have crashed? Something that might have been recovered? This is the logical leap that many conspiracy theorists have made, and it's not entirely unreasonable.
The CIA has declassified thousands of documents about Area 51. None mention alien spacecraft. But absence of evidence, as they say, isn't evidence of absence. And there's always been something about Area 51 that makes people wonder.
The real history is extraordinary. The spy planes, the black budgets, the technologies decades ahead of their time. It's more impressive than any science fiction.
Maybe that's what Area 51 really represents. Not aliens, but the fundamental human condition. We're a species that looks up at the night sky and wonders. We're a species that builds walls and keeps secrets.
But before we get to the philosophical conclusions, let's hear from the skeptics. Let's examine why people believe what they believe and whether those beliefs are justified.
The black world of classified programs extended far beyond aircraft. It included missile systems, satellite technologies, communication networks, and weapons systems that wouldn't be acknowledged for decades. Billions of dollars were spent each year on programs that didn't appear in any budget the public could see.
This massive secret infrastructure created a culture of compartmentalization, where even senior government officials often didn't know what was happening in programs outside their direct oversight. The result was a system that was almost designed to generate conspiracy theories.
Now let's hear from the skeptics, because the story of Area 51 is not just about what people believe. It's about why they believe it. And that process is fascinating in its own right. Understanding how conspiracy theories form and persist can help us think more clearly about what we choose to believe.
The first thing to understand is that human memory is unreliable. When people claim to have seen something strange at Area 51, they're often recounting memories that are years or even decades old. And memories change. They get embellished. They get confabulated. This is well documented in psychology, the misinformation effect.
Studies have shown that when people are told misleading information about an event, they incorporate that information into their memories. They become genuinely convinced of things that never happened. This is called the misinformation effect, and it's been replicated in hundreds of experiments.
And think about what happens with UFO sightings. Someone sees something in the sky. They have no frame of reference. Then they read a book or see a documentary that tells them it might be aliens. And suddenly, their memory shifts. The light becomes a spacecraft. The sound becomes an engine. The ordinary becomes extraordinary.
Let's look at Bob Lazar again, because the skeptics have a field day with his story. We've already discussed the problems. No verifiable education, no verifiable employment. Element 115 that doesn't work the way he said it did. But there's more.
Then there's the problem of government competence. Conspiracy theories assume that the government can keep a massive secret, alien spacecraft, reverse-engineered technology, alien bodies, for decades. But the US government can't even keep simple secrets. This is an important point.
Edward Snowden leaked NSA documents with relative ease. Chelsea Manning leaked diplomatic cables. The Pentagon Papers were published in the New York Times. If there really were alien bodies at Area 51, would they still be hidden? Wouldn't someone, some scientist, some engineer, some whistleblower, have come forward by now?
The skeptics also point out that the CIA has declassified thousands of documents about Area 51, and none of them mention aliens. Not one. We've seen the U-2 files, the A-12 files, the F-117 files. They all describe conventional aircraft. There's nothing about extraterrestrial technology.
Now, conspiracy theorists will say those documents are part of the cover-up, that the really classified information is still hidden, and that's unfalsifiable. You can't prove a negative. You can't prove that aliens don't exist at Area 51, because absence of evidence isn't proof of absence.
But it does seem odd that there's literally nothing, no document, no memo, no credible whistleblower who has provided verifiable evidence. In an era of Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks, you'd think something would have leaked by now.
None of this proves there are no aliens at Area 51. It just means there's no credible evidence. And in the absence of evidence, the rational choice is to believe the explanation that has evidence: spy planes. But rationality isn't the only game in town.
Humans are storytelling animals. We believe things for emotional reasons, not just logical ones. And Area 51 speaks to something deep in us. The desire to believe we're not alone in the universe. The suspicion that our government is hiding something. The wonder at the possibility that the universe is stranger than we can imagine.
There's also the issue of what we might call confirmation bias in UFO sightings. People see what they expect to see, or what they've been told to see. In the context of Area 51, where everyone expects to see UFOs, ordinary aircraft take on extraordinary meanings.
This isn't to dismiss all UFO sightings as misidentifications. Some genuinely remain unexplained. But it does suggest that we should be cautious about drawing conclusions from witness testimony alone, especially when those witnesses have been primed by years of conspiracy theory exposure.
Let's jump forward to 2019, because in that year, Area 51 went from conspiracy theory to internet meme to actual real-life event. It was a remarkable moment, proof that the Area 51 myth had permeated popular culture to an extraordinary degree.
It started, as so many things do in the modern age, with a joke. A college student in California named Matty Roberts created a Facebook event. He called it Storm Area 51. They can't stop all of us. It was clearly meant to be humorous, a bit of satire about the absurdity of the whole Area 51 obsession.
The event was satirical. The description suggested that participants should Naruto run, that distinctive arms behind the back sprint from the anime Naruto, to move faster than bullets. It was clearly meant to be humorous, a joke, nothing serious, but the internet is a strange beast.
The event went viral, massively, unexpectedly viral. More than 2 million people said they were going. 1.5 million said they were interested. It became one of the most popular Facebook events in history, a genuine phenomenon.
The US Air Force took notice. They issued a stern warning. Area 51 is an open training range for the US Air Force, and we would discourage anyone from trying to enter the area. We guard the area aggressively. Any attempts to break onto the installation will be responded with lethal force.
That warning, of course, only made things worse. The memes multiplied. The jokes intensified. Suddenly, what had been a fringe conspiracy theory was all over every news outlet in the world. Area 51 had gone mainstream, not as a serious topic, but as a cultural reference.
On September 20th, 2019, the raid was scheduled. And here's where reality intruded on the fantasy. Instead of millions of people flooding the Nevada desert, which would have been a genuine national emergency, about 1,500 people showed up.
Many of them were there for the festivals that had sprung up in the area. Alien Stock in Rachel, Nevada, and another event in Hico. They were there for the music, the community, the experience. They were there to be part of a joke that had become a real-life event.
Only about 150 people made their way to the actual gates of Area 51. 7 were arrested for trespassing. 2 were injured in a rollover crash near the town of Rachel. No aliens were freed. No spacecraft were recovered. But something interesting had happened.
The conspiracy theory had been mainstreamed. It had become a cultural event, a shared joke that millions of people were in on. Area 51 had transcended its origins as a secret military base and become a symbol of something else. The human love of mystery, the joy of speculation, the pleasure of believing in something impossible.
And that's perhaps the most significant impact of Area 51. It's not just a place, it's a symbol of government secrecy, of public curiosity, of the human need to believe in something bigger than ourselves. It's become shorthand for the place where the government hides things.
Area 51 has spawned an entire economy in Nevada. There's the Alien Highway, a stretch of road that runs past the boundary of the exclusion zone. There's the Little Ailey Inn, a restaurant and motel in Rachel, where UFO enthusiasts gather to share stories and look at the desert. There are tours, museums, merchandise. It's big business.
Today, Groom Lake is still active. Satellite images show new runways, new hangars, aircraft shapes the public has never seen before. And that raises the same question people have been asking for 70 years. What exactly are they flying out there?
The answer is probably mundane. More spy planes, more experimental aircraft, more classified technology. But maybe that's not what we want to hear. Maybe we want there to be something more, something impossible, something extraterrestrial.
Satellite analysts and aerospace enthusiasts have identified several intriguing possibilities in recent imagery. Some believe they've spotted hypersonic aircraft capable of traveling at speeds exceeding Mach 10, 5 times faster than the Blackbird. Others point to next-generation stealth drones, with bizarre angular designs that seem to defy conventional aircraft architecture. Long-endurance surveillance drones, potentially capable of remaining aloft for days or weeks, have also been speculated about. One thing is certain. Each generation of secret aircraft, when first seen, looks like something from another world. The U-2 was called a UFO. The F-117 was called a UFO. Whatever is flying over Groom Lake today probably is too. Today, Area 51 remains one of the most restricted places in America. The surrounding area is still designated as a military exclusion zone, and satellite imagery periodically reveals new facilities, new runways, and aircraft that don't match any known civilian design. The questions continue.
What are they flying now? The honest answer is, we don't know for certain. But given the history, the U-2, the Blackbird, the F-117, it's a safe bet they're testing the next generation of classified aircraft. The spy plane programs of tomorrow, as yet unnamed and unseen by the public.
It's late at night in the Nevada desert. The stars are out. More stars than most people will ever see in their lives. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a river of light. And the silence is so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat. And somewhere, in the darkness, there's a fence. And beyond that fence, there's a runway.
Right now, as you listen to this, there are probably aircraft at Groom Lake. Experimental aircraft. Aircraft that we don't know about. Aircraft that, if we saw them, would look like UFOs to us. That's the irony. In 1955, the U-2 looked like a UFO. In the 1970s, the F-117 looked like a UFO. Whatever they're flying now probably looks like a UFO too.
So are there aliens at Area 51? Probably not. Not in the sense that the conspiracy theories suggest. But here's what I know. There are secrets. Real secrets. Things the government won't tell us. Things that, when they eventually come to light, will be remarkable enough to rival any science fiction.
Here's what we know for certain. Right now, tonight, as you listen to this, there are aircraft taking off from that runway. Experimental machines. Classified technologies. Things that will one day change the world or remain secret forever. And when people see them, they'll call them UFOs, just like always.
The desert stretches on, the stars don't blink, and somewhere out there in the darkness, something is flying. We just don't know what it is. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the mystery is the point. Maybe the wondering is what makes us human.
So the next time you see a headline about Area 51, about aliens, about secret spacecraft, about government cover-ups, remember this. The truth is probably boring. It's probably just another generation of spy planes, another leap in technology, another secret that will eventually be declassified and filed away in some archive.
But the legend is magnificent. The story of Area 51, the story of a secret base in the desert where the government hides impossible things, is a story that speaks to something deep in us. And sometimes, the legend is better than the truth.
Thanks for listening to Unexplained History. I'm Tom.
The desert air is still tonight. Somewhere beyond the fence line, lights move across the horizon. A shape passes overhead, silent and visible to most, heading toward the runway. And then, nothing. Just the stars, unchanged for millennia. The desert night stretches on. The stars don't blink. And somewhere beyond those fences, something is flying. We don't know what it is. Maybe we never will. Maybe that's exactly how it should be. As we conclude this journey through the history of Area 51, one thing becomes clear. The truth is often stranger than fiction. The actual story of this place, the spy planes, the black budgets, the technological marvels, is already extraordinary. Whether or not you believe in the alien theories, Area 51 represents something important about human nature.
We want to believe in something bigger than ourselves. We look at the stars and wonder. We build secrets and hide them. And we never stop asking questions, even when the answers might be disappointing. That's what makes us human. That's what Area 51 represents. Thanks for listening to Unexplained History. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow and leave a review. It helps us keep uncovering stories the world has forgotten. Next time, we're exploring the Demon Core, the cursed plutonium sphere that killed 2 scientists and haunted everyone who touched it.